This week has been a mixed bag of news for progressive Democratic candidates. On the one hand, Summer Lee holds a narrow lead in the primary for a Pittsburgh area House seat, despite an intense big money campaign against her. Now, if she secures the Democratic nomination, she would likely become the state's first black congresswoman and the newest member of the so-called squad. Also in Pennsylvania, progressive Senate candidate John Fetterman dominated his primary against moderate Conor Lamb and then raised over $1 million off of that victory. In Texas, progressive Jessica Cisneros is gaining momentum in her primary runoff against Congressman Henry Cuellar on Tuesday. Senator Bernie Sanders even traveled out to the Lone Star State, to help boost her campaign. The incumbent Cuellar has recently come under fire from progressives and other circles of the Democratic Party for his voting record on abortion rights. But interestingly enough, and surprisingly, that did not stop Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Congressman Jim Clyburn from endorsing him. Meanwhile, progressives in other parts of the country, though, aren't faring as well. This week, progressive candidates lost primaries in 2 North Carolina districts and 1 in Kentucky. And just 2 weeks ago, former Bernie Sanders' surrogate, Nina Turner, lost a primary for her second congressional bid in Ohio. And there could be more ups and downs ahead, especially here in New York. There is a new draft congressional map that has thrown Democrats into chaos, potentially forcing multiple marquee lawmakers to actually run against one another. You have House Oversight Chair Carolyn Maloney, who is a progressive. She is now set to face House Judiciary Chair Jerry Nadler for control of a new seat. But the real hit for progressive came in the lower Hudson Valley area, where the draft map has scrambled several districts. The DCCC Chair, Sean Patrick Maloney, says that he is abandoning his current seat, and instead he's going to run for the seat that is currently held by freshman progressive Congressman Mondaire Jones. That would essentially force Jones to either face the more established Maloney or run in the district currently represented by another fellow progressive, Congressman Jamal Bowman. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries called it, quote, part of a vicious national pattern targeting districts represented by members of the Congressional Black Caucus. So all of this raises a lot of very important questions. What is the takeaway from this week's mixed results for progressives and the challenges that lay ahead? And what lessons can progressives bring forward to future races ahead of the midterms? Joining me now to discuss this and more, Democratic strategist and Justice Democrat spokesman, Waleed Shahid. Waleed, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for making time for us. So progressives had some victories and some losses, as I was just mentioning there on Tuesday. What is your big takeaway from these results? How could progressives improve their chances the next time around?
Well, thanks so much for having me. When you were doing your bit, I was like, wow, that all really happened this week. There's a lot happening in the battle for the soul of the Democratic Party right now. And the battles happening in Democratic primaries are very important in terms of defining who the Democratic Party is and who its leaders are. And so right now you have major Republican-funded super PACs in primaries all across the country trying to defeat progressives and working class and women candidates and defend more moderate corporate aligned candidates. And this is a record number of spending being done by Republican funded super PACs in Democratic primaries to keep out, principals, community organizers, immigration lawyers, human rights activists from entering into the Democratic Party. And all we're doing at Justice Democrats is trying to align the base of the party, the bottom of the party, with the top. And, Summer Lee had a major win. Some of the outlets have already announced that she's won, and some other ones we're still waiting on. But this is a real battle about who controls the party and who it's represented by. And, folks can go to justicedemocrats.com and get involved in that fight.
Yeah, let me ask you about North Carolina. I mentioned the 2 North Carolina races where 2 progressives resoundingly lost their races. You told Politico we have to be really strategic in our resources, and we didn't have the capacity to compete in the 2 open North Carolina races. What's behind the lack of resources? Is the messaging and the funding not resonating with people you need more backing from, or is it the resources committed on the other side, whether it be AIPAC and their allies and other super PACs, just drowning out the resources that you guys have?
Well, AIPAC is spending millions of dollars in each of these primaries. You know, AIPAC is an organization that has endorsed over 100 Republicans who voted to overturn Joe Biden's election in 2020. It's very ironic that AIPAC now wants to decide who gets to be a Democratic member of Congress now. So that's one part of it. And, you know, it's no secret that billionaires don't want to fund progressives who are going to hold billionaires and corporations accountable. And so, you know, we always expect to be outspent, but the way that we're being outspent now is much bigger than it's ever been when, you know, AOC ran in 2018 as a Justice Democrat, or Jamal Bowman ran in 2020 as a Justice Democrat. And so we really need grassroots support, small dollar donations, the kinds of donations that powered Bernie Sanders' election runs and even Joe Biden's presidential runs, just everyday people getting involved and chipping in $3, $20 to really, you know, get in this fight for our democracy. We cannot allow a Republican-funded special interest group that is not aligned with the interests of the Democratic Party to take control of our party. And again, you may have mentioned this before, this is a group that won't even talk about their #1 stated foreign policy goal in any of the attack ads that they're running. They don't even want to have a debate about foreign policy in any of these primaries.
You've also pointed out that, you know, success begets success. So moderates were emboldened by Shontel Brown's victory in Ohio earlier this month, and then Summer Lee will embolden Jessica Cisneros. What lessons from Summer Lee's race, John Fetterman's race, and others do you think can apply to some of these upcoming contests, including Jessica Cisneros next week?
Look, the similarity between all three of those candidates is that they're authentic, they're grounded in their community, and they are independent in many ways from the political establishment and the powers that be in Washington, D.C. And so I really think if you invest in authentic candidates who really can get their message across and say what their policy beliefs are, that can go a long way. And so I think, you know, Justice Democrats, we have 2 more candidates coming this summer. Kina Collins in Chicago, who's running against Danny Davis, and Jessica Cisneros on Tuesday, who's running against anti-choice Henry Cuellar. And I think Summer Lee's victory will really show proof of concept this election that if progressives build diverse coalitions, remain independent from the corporate donors and Washington establishment, and fight for their values, that we can really, really win these races, even when Speaker Nancy Pelosi has decided to endorse an anti-choice candidate with abortion rights on the line.
Let me just ask you really quickly about this debacle here in New York. What do you make of the way these districting maps have some of the progressive candidates potentially facing off against more institutional candidates, and at the same time, as Hakeem Jeffries said, targeting members of the Congressional Black Caucus?
What DCCC Chair Sean Patrick Maloney is doing is disgraceful and embarrassing. This is a divide and conquer strategy by Sean Patrick Maloney to pit Jamal Bowman and Mondaire Jones against each other, 2 black young progressives. And the fact that the DCCC chair, the person who is responsible for giving Democrats the majority against Republicans this year, he himself is afraid of going up against Republicans in his own backyard. What does that tell you about the Democratic Party? It's frankly baffling, it's embarrassing, and the party deserves better.